Okay, welcome everyone. I just wanted to explain that my work this morning that I'm going to share with you stems from my participation in a class taught by Dr. James Anderson from U of I. Many of us in our department were fortunate enough to take this class on racial and cultural diversity in America. And I became very interested in this topic. I chose the title very deliberately because I really do believe that Black women's hair is their crowning glory, a symbol of strength and resilience. The purpose of this workshop is not to endorse any one hairstyle over another. Rather, my intent is to show how women have suffered discrimination from systemic racism about their natural hair. As a white woman, I cannot presume to know about a Black woman's complex relationship with its hair, with her hair, or understand its powerful symbolism. But I am a person who's committed to becoming more anti-racist. And I can share what I have learned about the struggles that Black women have endured and echo their rightful demands for respect and validation. So some people will say, well, is hair really that big a deal? Well, the answer is, of course, it is, because it's not really just hair. Most people would agree that it's a reflection of self image in our society and throughout history, but it does play a very important role. I can ask the question, are you sensitive about personal appearance? Many people are. And of course, I'm one of them. Nobody wants to be criticized or ridiculed because of how she or he looks. So when we talk about Black hair, the topic is not superficial. We know that discrimination against Black women based on natural hair has far reaching ramifications. Microaggressions that pinpoint Black women's hair have existed throughout history. Unfortunately, they continue today. Here we have, I think, a very important quote, and it was offered by writer and educator Shamika Sanders in an article in Essence magazine. In this article, she comments on how women are forced to make a difficult choice. Namely, they have to decide whether to wear their hair as it grows naturally or try to conform to Eurocentric beauty ideals. I think it's good to take a look at understanding Black hair and understanding its texture, curl patterns, color, structure, and fragility. In preparation for this workshop, I actually talked to a few people who were cosmetologists, and they were very forthcoming on the beauty as well as the challenges in styling Black hair. And we know that the characteristics of each hair type are unique. Each Black woman is an individual, and she makes personal decisions about her hair. To change the appearance of Black hair, it really is necessary for women to rely on chemical processing or relaxers. So we want to begin then by looking at some hair history. I think to understand why Black women's hair holds such significance, we need to look back in history and examine its role. So I'd like to begin by exploring its roots. We know that hair in Africa had great significance. It told many things about a woman, and it really was tied so intricately with her identity. So again, when we think about significance of hair, here we see all of these factors that show just what an integral part it played in women's lives. We know that everything changed too when people were cruelly taken from their homes in Africa and brought to America. In slavery, Black women were denigrated. Their beautiful hair did not conform to European-centric concepts of beauty, and they suffered in ways that were mental, physical, and emotional. The website They Can't Take Our Crowns talks extensively about the effects of slavery on women in many aspects of their lives, including their hair. In slavery, women were forced to do manual labor in America, and many worked in the fields and covered their hair. Others worked in homes. Some made the personal decision to hide their hair to deter the attention of slave owners and overseers. Women were subjected to beatings, abuse, and rape. So they were very protective, and at the same time, very much affected by the cruelty that they endured. I want to share with you a brief infographic that shows the history of Black hair and shows the changes that occurred. So we can see that before slavery, African women took that great pride in their hairstyles, and they were often very elaborate with great significance. Of course, in slavery, women had no hair products, so they used butter, kerosene, and even bacon grease to groom their hair. When slavery ended, there were new roles and hair options for Black women. And there was also an explosion of new hair products. For example, hot combs and hair growth products came on the market. We know that Madam C.J. Walker played a significant role in making different kinds of hair care available to Black women. Many of you may have seen the recent film about her and be very familiar with her history. So as we continue then, we see that after Madam C.J. Walker's inroads, George Johnson also created a hair straightener for men and women. So people were had more options in terms of the way they chose to wear their hair. The 1960s, of course, was a very significant time, and the Afro hairstyle was not only a hairstyle option, but it was also most significantly a symbol of Black pride. In 1980, some of you might remember Michael Jackson's Thriller and his introduction of the Jerry curl to popular culture, followed by Janet Jackson about a decade later in her performance in Poetic Justice, when she started a trend with Black box braids. And since that time, since the 2000s on, the Black beauty market has really exploded. And we know that there's renewed interest in natural styles for reasons of finances, health, convenience, and personal preference. So I think that this infographic really takes us through a very interesting history of Black women's hair. Next, I want to share with you from Elle.com, has collected some Black hair stories. And I think it'll be very interesting for us to hear from these individual women. So let me cue this up and we will listen to a few of their stories.
Someone very senior saw me, admired my braids, and before I could even say thank you, began to run her fingers through my hair. It made me feel
embarrassed,
alone,
lost,
different,
weird, discouraged.
It made me feel a lot more self-conscious and made me reconsider what I thought was beautiful and if it was all centered around what my hair looked like.
Working in corporate America, it's the norm for Black women to conform to straight hair. So I found myself getting relaxers, weaves, all types of things to keep the hair straight. Was I comfortable with it? When I look back, not necessarily, but it's what you needed to do to get the job done.
8 hours between 2 days. That's how long it took for me to firmly grip my rat tail comb, add crooked parts to my freshly washed natural hair, and wrap kinky Marley twists around the root of my hair. Look how I ate that, I told myself as I stared in the mirror at the finished product. And all it took was a 2-minute encounter with a white woman at work to make me question my decision.
About the first 12 years during my career, I've never gotten braids. I've always wanted to. I actually really love them. And I was always told that it's very unprofessional and that in order to succeed, I should have more of a relaxed hair look.
Now I see that when I walk into the room, the first thing people will notice is my skin, and then directly after, my hair.
Oh my gosh, stop. This hair looks so amazing, she said. If there was a hair awards at work, you would win it. I need a picture.
I know this person meant well, but it felt as if I was more for show and that my body in that moment did not belong to me.
My boss, she was very vocal about how she felt about each of the styles, and she would name them. When I wore my hair natural, like a wash and go with like the curls out, she would call that my wild look. If I straightened my hair and wore a goddess braid, then she would call that my Princess Leia look.
My favorite is when I change my hairstyle and they say, I like this better than the last. Sis, who asked you?
I was 1 month in on my new job.
This was the first time I came in with a new hairstyle.
My hair stitched in the most perfect cornrows.
I had my cornrows in.
A white woman,
My white coworker comes up to me and says,
and I quote,
oh look, you have the Kardashian braids.
"That's so Kim K of you."
When I was in the summer of 6th grade, I decided to mix my braids with different colors, and I thought it was the coolest thing in the whole entire world. I went to school on the first day, and I was immediately singled out by a school principal. She came up to me and said, multiple braids are not allowed. That night I went home, and me and my mom frantically took out all of my braids, and I just sat there crying because I felt so outsider, so different, and so alone.
So here I'm in college in New City, a PWI, and they were hosting a holiday party. I had a small afro at the time. When I opened the door, another freshman who I knew from other classes yelled super loudly, oh my gosh, Eunice, your hair is so different. It reminds me of a poodle. And everybody else started to like descend upon me and like start grabbing and touching my hair, and I literally didn't know what to do at that moment. I couldn't even move. I felt beautiful, but you made me feel different.
As a Black woman, taking care of my hair is my sense of wellness. Can me and my hair just exist without being treated like I'm abnormal?
I wear braids, I wear twist outs, I wear crochet. I can do so much with my hair.
My hair is transformative. My hair is sexy.
I feel empowered by it. It's my best asset. When I walk in the room, I feel like it talks volumes of myself without me having to say anything.
I feel proud,
Beautiful, empowered.
unique, almost unstoppable.
The texture, the color, the style of our hair is different, and that's what makes us beautiful.
Would anybody like to comment on what they heard?
Hi, Janice.
Yes.
Hi. To comment, so what I heard in a few of those women's stories, I think a reoccurring theme is that sometimes somebody might give what they intend to be a compliment, but they may not necessarily understand how that is perceived by the receiver. So while their intentions may be good, I think that there's also, a perspective that we just may not be aware of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a very good comment and observation, Elise, because we know that very often when people make microaggressions, it's not their intent, to offend, but at the same time, the microaggression really is offensive and it hurts very much. I know that in the literature that I've read, some of the commentators have talked about how each microaggression is a small cut and yet those small cuts all lead to substantial wounds. So I think that's very important for us to keep in mind. Would anyone else like to comment on what they heard?
Yeah, I would, Janice. In the 60s, when I was in college, the afro was really, really big. And, everybody kind of embraced it that was Black. And even white people, like my sister, had natural curly hair. And she made her hair into an afro. And when she came home, my father had a fit.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Wendy. I mean, not only a lot of women, we have a lot of Black women, of course, who are members of the naturalista community, but there are also white women who really want to embrace their style, this style, either if it's their hair, that has a similar texture and curl, or maybe it's even a style that they want to imitate. Any other comments?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to say that for white women, we need to be very careful because we can culturally appropriate without even realizing, that maybe we're doing that. So it's not okay for a white woman to wear, let's say, box braids, for instance, no matter how pretty they think it is or how much they like it, it is not appropriate for them to wear it because it is cultural appropriation.
Yes, thank you, Rosanna. I think that's another excellent point to keep in mind. Okay, so as we heard some of those women's stories, I think we'll all agree that even though each woman has a personal relationship with her hair, there is certainly a commonality between the stories they tell about the microaggressions that they have suffered. So again, it's always important to keep in mind and try to have that sensitivity. And of course, when we do microaggress, always to be willing, to listen and to apologize and learn from our experiences. Okay, so next we're going to talk a little bit about bias and microaggressions. We know that these are terms that we hear all the time, and I'd like to invite our group. Would anyone like to give us a working definition of bias? What do you understand by bias? Okay, well, I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but really bias it's a preconceived notion. And according to the Perception Institute, hair bias is really negative stereotypes or attitudes that manifest themselves unconsciously or consciously toward natural or textured hair. So every day, all women make decisions about their hair. Black women may decide to wear it natural or decide to wear a weave or a wig on a certain day. And that certainly is their individual choice. But their choices often attract microaggression from people who might not respect their personal choices or personal space. We know that microaggressions can perpetuate and normalize racism. When people commit microaggressions and say that they're the subject of the microaggression is overreacting, they are re-victimizing that target and adopting a victim status for themselves. So again, it's so important to be able to acknowledge and to apologize for any microaggression. I ran into a quote on a website, Parents for Diversity, that I thought was very significant. A lawyer and writer named Simone Abba Akianu states that microaggressions are like bee stings. We can recover from the sting, but we never forget how it feels. So again, I think that is very significant as we think about microaggressions and bias. We know that bias can be of two types. Implicit bias is one that a person might be unaware of initially. For example, some people feel that women's natural hair, whether it's worn in afro, locks, twists, or braids, may connote a more nationalistic posture to whites. Professor Nadia E. Brown of Purdue University has talked about this on the Scholars Strategy Network. She also mentions that straightened tresses, whether they are achieved through chemical processing or with heat, may appear to indicate a mainstream political stance, more assimilated to white norms. We also know that others have explicit bias. They are very much aware of their bias, and many times this bias will take its form in different ways. For example, the explicit bias is, of course, present in the conscious mind, whereas implicit is subconscious. Dr. Daryl Sue is a very well-known researcher on the topic of microaggressions, and he notes different types. For example, verbal, behavioral, and environmental. A behavioral microaggression might occur when somebody acts in a hurtful or discriminatory way to a certain group of people. It might be a job interviewer, for example, ignoring a Black woman with natural hair because he or she has a bias against it. A verbal microaggression might be a comment or question that is hurtful or stigmatizing. For example, saying, "Every day you look different. How many wigs do you have?" Maybe a person doesn't think that this is microaggressive, but of course it is. We could also have environmental microaggressions. And one that comes to mind is when some stores will group beauty products along ethnic or racial lines. So I think that anyone who is interested in doing more research on microaggressions might be very interested in the work of Dr. Sue. He's also written about types of this nature. We have the micro invalidations, the micro insults, and micro assaults. For example, a micro invalidation might be minimizing or ignoring a person's feelings and statements, denying racism or oppression, denying white privilege, and so forth. A micro insult, again, implications of negativity, diminishing another person, or outright rudeness. Micro assaults, of course, are probably the most physically aggressive. These, of course, can include name calling, shunning, physical attacks, and purposeful discrimination. So I think it's interesting when we look at the wide range of microaggressive behaviors that people can encounter.
Hey, Janice,
Yes.
there's a couple of comments in the chat box that were
I'm sorry,
examples.
Margaret.
No worries, I'll help you out here. So Jessica talked about the fact that she read a news story that there are more cameras and security near the checkout step around Black beauty products. And similarly, Rosanna said that Black beauty products are locked up and white ones are not.
Yeah, and those are really so insulting, I think, to people. And again, perhaps stores need to be informed. I know that yesterday some of us were fortunate enough to listen to Dr. Baker Bell, and we know that in our department we're very interested in the relationships of microaggression and oppression and language. So she also talked about activism and how activism can really have an effect on the existing institutions. So when Jessica and Rosanna very kindly offered those examples, that's the first thing that came to my mind. You know, those are things that had to change. Are there any other comments in the chat room, Margaret, that you could share?
Nope, we're up to date.
We're up to date. Perfect.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so to continue then, when we think about common microaggressions, I'm sure that these are ones that you may have heard or that you may have been familiar with. For example, is that your real hair? Are you wearing a weave or a wig? What's under it? You don't mind if I touch your hair, right? And then very often with this question, a person doesn't even wait for permission, but instead might go right ahead and violate a Black woman's personal space. We know that no one is entitled to ask personal questions or invade personal space. Then why do people do it? Would anyone like to comment on that? Either verbally or in the chat room.
I just want to bring up just one thought that's been ruminating in my head. Back in the day, my mom was a Chicago public school teacher, and I went with her entire first grade class to the Bozo Circus show. And I was the only person with non-Black hair pretty much in that group. And they all kept feeling my hair. And I was young enough that I hadn't quite figured out, like we were not at the point that we were microaggressing. We were just curious.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder when that changes.
Yeah, and again, Margaret, in terms of the literature that I have read, a lot of times, you know, when you look at children do have that natural curiosity. And also, I think it speaks to the fact that perhaps people are not exposed to others outside of their own culture. And I think sometimes maybe that's where that natural curiosity stems from. But we know, of course, that to invade people's personal space is wrong on so many levels.
Yeah, because obviously I still remember it. I didn't feel threatened, you know, but yes, because
Yeah, and again, Margaret used that word threatened. I think that that's such a significant word because most of us, we have this personal bubble around us, right? Where we're not used to an individual coming too close to us. But when someone comes close enough to grab our hair, that of course, I think is very disconcerting. Do we have any other comments on that?
I think views on hair have changed in the last 5 years or so. I mean, now you see even football players with hair dreads hanging out the back of their helmets. You see much more variety of hair. I can remember the first time I saw a student in my high school with pink hair, and I remember being very shocked by just white hair that was colored pink. And now, you know, you see a variety of colors, you see a variety of hairstyles, and people have become more accepting. But as you were talking earlier, I was thinking about like Diana Ross and the Supreme and their very stylized white 60s hairstyles that they certainly would not have been accepted as they were had they not looked white, I think, at that time. So I think sometimes people ask personal questions in innocent ignorance, but I think other times people do it intentionally. I think they do it because they feel the person is of lesser standing and they can assert a little bit of power over them. And it's a way to, when you notice those things about a person, it's a way to put somebody in their, try to put or keep somebody in their place. And I'm using air quotes here when I say that. If you've had anything like that said to you on any part of your body or whatever, you realize the power of that to kind of take your breath away.
Yes, definitely. Mena Fambo is a British activist and an educator on anti-racism. And she actually, I had planned to show you one of her videos, but I know I'm having some technical difficulty, but I will share with everyone a reference sheet of all of the resources for this presentation. But one of the things that she decided to do on a college campus is exactly what people had done to her. Namely, regardless of the race of the student she saw, she would go up, ask a quick question, can I touch your hair? And then go right ahead and do it. And of course, the people's responses were, they were very startled. You know, they felt that it was a true invasion of their personal space and privacy. But at the same time, we know that this kind of behavior does go on. Any other comments on this?
Yeah, I'm white, but I have curly hair. And I remember once I walked into a store, I think it was Meijer, and I was wearing my hair curly that day. And I was walking down the aisle, minding my own business, shopping, and this man is coming towards me. I don't know, a stranger. And he looks at me and he goes, "Whoa, where did you get that hair?" And I was like, first of all, why are you talking to me? Why are you making comments about me personally? And I was like, I don't know, my father? Like, where are you trying to get with this question? I was so confused. And I don't think it was supposed to be malicious, but it's like, why do you feel the need to comment on people you don't even know? And so your question here, why do people do it? I think with children, yes, it's natural curiosity, but I think at some point you need to teach children that these kinds of comments are not acceptable so that they don't grow up to be adults like this man in the store who just felt entitled to make comments about my body.
Yes. Yes, definitely. And I think, Rosanna, your comment on the role of education is so important. Again, in doing research on this topic, I found that there are many children's books that do a wonderful job of celebrating diversity and explaining the respect that every individual is entitled to, and really explaining and answering questions like Margaret suggested about people's natural hair. We also know that there was an award-winning film recently, Hair Love, about a dad who has to do his little girl's hair, and that great relationship between them. So I think that education really is key here. Okay. So let's continue then. And I know that that many of us, realize the effects of these microaggressions on women. We know that their emotional health is impacted, as well as their physical health and mental well-being. All of us, I know, have the privilege of working with young people from all different walks of life and all different backgrounds. Yes, and I know that when we think about microaggressions, would anybody like to comment on a kind of microaggression maybe that they've witnessed and its possible effect either on emotional, physical, or mental well-being?
Janice, when I was in Japan, and people told me this might happen, a lot of people in Japan have never seen white people before. there's not that many tourists or whatever. And they don't say anything to you, but they stare at you. And I felt like a lot of people, especially children who had never seen anybody that was not Japanese, they would not say anything, but they would just keep staring at you because you were different.
Wendy, when we went to Hawaii, my youngest daughter was 18 months old and very much very, very blonde, a complete towhead. And we had to watch when we were in crowds because Japanese people would come up and touch her or take her by the hand. They wanted to be photographed with her because she was quote unquote American. And many times they did it without asking. And it kind of, you know, as a parent, it really freaks you out to have someone touching your young child. So we had to be really, really careful, we learned.
Yeah.
And part of it was just they wanted a picture of themselves with what they thought of as a blonde, blue-eyed American child. They wanted that American picture, whatever. But yeah, it was frightening.
And from listening to your comment, Patty, it made me think that the effects of microaggressions perhaps are not limited to an individual, but even extend to families. Because in your example, maybe not only was your daughter being affected mentally or emotionally, but you also suffered anxiety in that experience. Would anyone else like to comment?
Yeah, Janice, I remember when my family had first moved to the suburbs. I was only 5 years old. We moved from Chicago and we moved to Bensonville, and most of the people on our street had lived there for a very long time at that point. And so when we first moved in, of course, there's the talk that the gangsters from Chicago just moved on the block. And then once those families found out that we were Italian, we were no longer the gangsters, we were the mafia members. So it's just kind of silly, the stereotypes that, you know, kind of, I didn't quite understand it when I was older, younger, but when my parents told me about it, I was like, that's just ridiculous.
Yes. And I was doing some additional research, and I encountered an article by Gernert in the Harvard Gazette. And this writer actually pinpointed, in terms of emotional health, many people experience anger as the effect of microaggressions, but also low self-esteem, self-doubt. In terms of physical health, I, of course, I realized that there were a whole array of stress-related maladies that might result, but also things like thyroid issues, chronic infections, high blood pressure. These are all potential effects of microaggressions. And then also when we consider, mental well-being, we know that depression, suicide, fatigue, all of those are effects, again, of microaggressions. Just recently, in the interview that was aired with Meghan Markle, as a biracial woman, she expressed the mental effects of microaggressions on her life. And not only was she aggressed by family, but she also felt that she was aggressed by the British press. So, I think that's a very powerful example of the effects on a person's life. Anyone else want to comment maybe on things that you've noticed in your students, or maybe issues in this regard that your students have shared with you? Okay.
I actually have an interesting comment about Meghan Markle. It was a follow-up from a nonverbal specialist, body language specialist. And she talked, I thought maybe you were going to bring this up, Janice. She talked about how Megan's two pieces of hair that hang on, along her cheeks that kind of are loose and wispy and whatever. She says she thinks Megan does that to hide behind.
Mm.
So I thought that was interesting, just in terms of using, because Megan feels that way, right? So, and is, was struggling mentally with her health and such. Just an
Yes.
interesting thought from a
Yeah,
body language.
I was not aware of that comment, Margaret, but I appreciate it, and I can see really how it fits in with this discussion. The other comment just that I wanted to make in terms of physical health is that many women who undergo chemical processing or spend significant time and money having their hair straightened, very often this prevents them from doing activities like swimming or working out. So again, we can really see that this is not a superficial concern, that this is really, this whole issue of hair discrimination has far-reaching effects. Okay, and as we commented, we can see that every microaggression just pushes the knife in deeper and deeper. We know one microaggression, 2 microaggressions, then 3. The hurts just build and build. And I read about this cumulative effect in the December 2019 article from Inclusion, Diversity, Equality, and Accountability Study. And it explains the effects of these repeated microaggressions. So let's take a look at our discussion questions here. I think the first one we really did touch on already in our discussion, but I'm also very interested in ways to become an ally for people who experience microaggressions, either against their hair or any other aspects of their identity. Would anyone like to comment on that area of allyship?
Well, I think anytime you're trying to be an ally, you're wanting to be an advocate over an accomplice. And so when opportunities arise to being an advocate and supporting and going out of your box and maybe even just having empathy is enough in some situations.
Yeah, certainly. I think that as we hear these stories, many of us, our first response is empathy. But as we do our anti-racism work, I think again, we realize that that these comments, these behaviors, they have to be stopped because they're so hurtful. Again, going back to Dr. Baker Bell's lecture yesterday, she used the word soul crushing, I believe, several times in her presentation. And as I did this work and this reading and heard, on video from many different people and talked to, beauty professionals, they really stressed, that it's just so demeaning, as Elise talked about her family's experiences. And I think we all agree, anyone who is microaggressed feels that degradation. Would anyone else like to comment on that area of allyship?
I'm reminded of a quote that I heard somewhere. If you see something, say something.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you're witness to this type of experience and, it's safe, obviously, just try to step in and say something, or to the person, maybe like, hey, that's not cool, or that's not a nice thing to say to someone, just to to step in and make it clear that this is not appropriate.
Yes.
Yeah, and Jessica wrote in the chat box, no need to public shame, but to, respectfully interrupt.
Yes. And I think it depends on the relationship as well. If you have a relationship with the person who has committed a microaggression, it might open the door for a very honest and productive conversation. Any other comments, Margaret, in our chat box?
Nope, we're good.
Perfect. Okay. And what about this question? Because I know that the topic of microaggression is so important in our studies today, in our discussions. And I know that many of us approach this from different avenues. We may have people in our group who are psychology professionals or sociology professionals or health professionals. So I guess my question is, what can we learn from studying the origins and effects of microaggressions?
To me, it's becoming aware. So I live a very privileged life. I would not have thought that many years ago. I feel like I, worked hard to get where I am today, but I lived a privileged life that allowed me to do that. And I think becoming aware of these possibilities, noticing them instead of simply accepting that they were there, or if I hear something when I'm in a grocery store, or if I hear somebody say something, now I'm beginning to notice more of those things, and to develop a vocabulary of dealing with that is all just a learning experience for someone who grew up in a very sheltered white family, neighborhood, whatever. And just little things from saying, no, those kinds of jokes are not allowed in my house, or I think the big thing is becoming aware, because so many people who grew up like I did were bathed. My brain was bathed in microaggressions towards others. My family members, this is a huge admission for me, but my family members said things constantly, used derogatory terms for other groups of people. And I grew up with that, in my background, and it's taken me a while to realize to realize how I grew up and how I need to see those things, and to I never felt a part of that, but it was just there. It was just there like crummy wallpaper, it was just there around me. So for me, it's really beginning to see it and then address it when I can. And it's having the vocabulary and the right mannerisms or whatever to address it without making it worse.
Can I say something?
Yes, certainly.
I was wondering, we've been talking about these things. Being aware has been there for a long, long time. Aware, creating awareness. I think these things are not new things. Black and white America has been there forever, right? Historically, it's been a long time. And all our talks are trying to be aware of it. What can we really do practically to help this situation? Would be a good thing, like, I don't know, actively participate or, advocacy I can see, but though things have improved maybe in certain aspects, there are still people who are ignorant, but, instead of only being aware, what can we do? I'm into being active than being aware, because,
there's always talk, for academia, it's great because we are always talking and getting to know so many things, even today, right?
Yes.
Learning so much. I love to come to these discussion or here, silently here, because you do learn a lot. But it always at the end, it's like, yeah, so, okay, I'm aware today. You know what I mean? Just
Yes.
awareness has been like the diversity. Diversity talk has been there forever, right? We are aware of it, right? Creating awareness is there, but we've been creating awareness for such a long time, I feel. So where are the actions? What are we supposed to do?
Yes, and I'm so glad that you commented on that, Shireen. And I'm sorry, I just want to talk, I know we're running out of time, but let me just, because you had asked about what are we doing? And I wanted to talk for just a minute about some studies that have been undertaken. One is the Good Hair Study from the Perception Institute. And this was a computerized survey that women, Black and white, completed. And it discovered that 100% of women worry about their hair, that 1/3 of Black women do not exercise because of concerns about their hair. 20% feel pressure to straighten their hair, and they spend, of course, much more time and money in salons than white women do. It also discovered that women who are naturalistas, women who embrace natural hair, Black women, were, of course, the most supportive of their decision. There was bias found on the part of white women, which should not be surprising in light of our discussions. There is another study to handle issues of workplace discrimination. And this took place at Duke University by a Professor Rosette. And I think that it's very interesting to talk about what she discovered. And unfortunately, her discovery centered on the fact that in the workplace, that women are considered less professional if they do not conform to those white norms of straight hair. And I think that when we think about these studies, you're right, it starts with awareness, but it also does have significance in terms of change. So for example,
for African American women, the hesitation to wear their natural hair is often in direct relation to the professional backlash that may occur.
And there are not a lot of people like me in my office. Actually, I am the only person of color in my office setting. So I was definitely afraid, like if I come to work, with an afro or with, curls that one of them is lopsided and the other one is curled, right, are they going to feel a different type of way about me? Like, are my patients going to look at me weird? Am I going to be perceived in a different way? Am I going to, get sat down like, well, your hair is too wild, so we need you to kind of scale that back because you're I just didn't know how it was going to come off to my coworkers or my patients, but they've actually been going through the journey with me. So it was really nice that they embraced it with me. Like, well, what are you going to do tomorrow to your hair? Like, they were all just as excited about the experience as I was. So that
my news director is actually the one who saw me at a party. It was a going away party for one of my coworkers, and he saw my hair. It was twisted, similar to what I'm wearing now, and he said, "Carla, why don't you ever wear that on television?" And I had thought about it, but I never thought about approaching him because in my mind I just thought he was going to shoot down the idea. But he asked me, he said, "Why don't you ever wear that on television, your natural hair? I think it looks good." Well, that's all he had to say. Then I think within the next maybe 2 weeks, I was on air.
I have clients who run whole corporations, and they're the only woman in a position of, power and authority. They're much less African American. They can't do it yet. They're afraid to. They don't know what, how people are going to see them, if they're going to pay more attention to to their hair instead of, what they're saying? Are they still going to take them seriously? It's real fears that people have.
I had a job interview probably 3 years ago, maybe 4, closer to when I was fresh out of college. And I remember I had a job interview. Oh my gosh, I wanted the job so bad. And I wanted to have my hair in a curly bun because I was natural then, but I didn't really wear it out as much. And so I had it up, and I remember a role model in my life told me, oh, no, you better not go on that job interview with that bun. You better go get that hair pressed out. And so that was always a fear of mine. I think even to this day, I don't go on a lot of interviews that I feel like I want to go on, not because I don't think I qualify for the job, but because I'm conflicted about how my hair should look.
I do think in academia there is a little bit more leeway. However, I do think that the notion of having a polished professional look, the rhetoric and the kind of ideology behind that is also one that alienates Black women in terms of their expression of their hair.
Overall, the thing I see the most in terms of sort of around discourse or public discourse around natural hair from an interpersonal space is that a lot of times I feel as a Black woman, our bodies are sort of this on public display or sort of this public space where people feel as if they can sort of touch us or pet us, but particularly on our bodies, our hair, it's like that's some kind of open space for people to feel free to sort of explore their curiosities in a way that's inappropriate. A lot of times, oftentimes you'll see people want to touch Black women's hair or have inappropriate questions, right? So sometimes you may get a question like, is that your hair, right? Or you change it so often, right? And these are sort of microaggressions, right? It doesn't mean that they have to be bad intentions or that they're trying to hurt your feelings or any of those types of things.
But I did want to comment on Forbes because Forbes did a study about ways to equalize the playing field for Black interviewees. And they discovered that doing a panel interview was a way to eliminate possible bias against natural hair or other identifying factors, removing those factors from review of applications, and then offering diverse leadership development opportunities. This is some of the work that is coming out of those studies. And I think here we can see, those real life applications. Also, even in the Army, some of you might be aware that there were changes in Army policy around hair recently. So, for example, the Army no longer specifies that hair has to be longer than 1 inch. It does not require only one style. It permits, for example, a combination of braids and locks. And it considers the damage. For example, alopecia was one effect of Black women pulling their hair very tightly in buns. So the Army, I think, has also recognized the effects of hair discrimination. And then the Crown Act is another very recent legal protection. And of course, this is an acronym that stands for creating a respectful and open workplace for natural hair. And we see that Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey, who is one of the leaders of getting the Crown Act passed, talks about discrimination against Black hair is discrimination against Black people. Implicit and explicit biases against natural hair are deeply ingrained in workplace norms and society at large. This is a violation of our civil rights, and it happens every day for Black people across the country. So I really appreciate, that comment that we need to move just from awareness to action. And I want to say that maybe the action is not as swift as we would like it or as it needs to be, but I do think that we see action in these areas, so that hopefully women will be able to celebrate that crowning glory, not only of their hair, but of their intelligence and of their hearts. So in closing, I'd like to say that I really am so happy that you were able to share in this discussion today. I hope that you found it valuable, and I hope that it'll promote greater research on your part, as well as grappling with these ways of not only how to be aware, but how to act. So I know that our time is just about up. I really, again, consider it a privilege to be able to speak on this topic. And I thank you for your kind attention today. Margaret, do we have any other comments in our chat box?
Just so many accolades, Janice, for everything that you've done. I think all of us found it beyond interesting, and we appreciate all the research that you did. Just fascinating. And you know, every day we engage in these conversations, my mind gets more blown and more blown, and you added to it today, Janice. So that's what people are saying. It was just incredible, and thank you for your time.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Janice.
Thank you. Bye.
Not a problem. Thank you so much.
Bye.